Hello everyone, welcome to this next session of the Mindful Drinking Festival. This evening is a Q&A with Millie Gooch. Some of you may know Millie from Sober Girl Society and from pulling pints in, is it Sainsbury's alcohol-free bar?
It was Sainsbury's alcohol-free bar.
Pictures of you pulling that pint.
Yeah.
And many other things in the sober space. She also runs phenomenal events, which I'm always very jealous of because she does them so well. And so welcome, Millie. Welcome to the festival again.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's right. And if anyone's wondering, both of us have got building work outside where we are. I can hear them power hosing something outside.
Yeah.
So apologies to people if you've got some strange sounds. I'm gonna do some muting of my my audio at some point during this, I think, to drown out the sound. But today we're going to talk about making friends. And I hadn't realized, I guess because I'm a major extrovert, that I didn't realize how big an issue of anxiety this was for people, both in terms of why they're drinking to begin with, and also why it is how it's the thing that makes them anxious about giving up drinking. And what I'm really so you should be the expert at this, Millie, but also I'm always really intrigued because you've given up drinking really young in comparison. I was 38. And how old were you when you gave up?
I was 26 when I stopped drinking.
So there we are. There's a good some years between us. But why, for somebody that young to give up drinking is quite a big thing, particularly when social pressures are so high. Why did you? What's your story?
So the main reason that I stopped drinking was actually the effect that it was having on my mental health. So I would get that horrendous fear, anxiety that would last 3 or 4 days. I started drinking when I went to university, and I just never ever felt like I didn't have a choice to not drink. Like there was a shot glass in my Freshers Welcome pack. Everything was a bar crawl, and I just got kind of sucked into that mentality of go hard or go home. So I was also kind of a binge drinker, a blackout binge drinker. I never really learned to drink sensibly or just have 1 or 2. And as I got into my 20s, I started working in media, which is super boozy. So I would go to a lot of work events and I would have champagne thrust in my hand. And then it just got steadily worse. So I would, wake up in train stations miles away from my house because I got so drunk and fallen asleep on the train. I was embarrassing myself at work nights. I was waking up in stupid places and doing stupid things. And then I really started to notice the effect that it had on my mental health. So after drinking, I would have severe anxiety and depression for so long. And then I actually got into a cycle of trying to quell that anxiety by drinking. So I would, I'd be feeling really nervous and anxious. And then by a Friday, I'd go, well, I know what will stop me overthinking. I'll get really drunk. And then it would just get into this real cycle of hangover, shame, and then repeat all over again. And I got to about 26, and I went out on a night out, and I just got horrendously drunk. Woke up next day and just felt so ill, so mortified. I was physically shaking with anxiety. And I read The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober, and it just changed my mindset around alcohol and drinking. And I think the main thing for me, because I was young, is the biggest thing in my head was, well, I'm not going to be fun. I'm going to be really boring. No one's going to want to hang out with me. I'm not going to make any friends. I'm not going to be able to sober date. How am I going to do all these things? But when I read Catherine's book, it really focused on, the clue is in the title, the joy and the happiness that sobriety could bring, whereas I only had ever seen it as giving up, a deprivation, something that would take away from my social life, and actually perhaps something that could add. So yeah, that was kind of the full circle in a nutshell.
No, but I'm really intrigued because you didn't start drinking till you went to university, where most of us have started. I started at 14 because drinking in the pubs underage was a lot easier then. So my drinking career started really young, before I'd even fully developed. So what got you into drinking to begin with, and why didn't you do it before? How did you manage to avoid that social pressure before?
So when I was younger, I was really into competitive dancing. So I did it really properly. When I was 18, I was on Britain's Got Talent, got in the semi-final, and we got beaten by a dancing dog. So
I never knew this bit about you, Millie. I never knew this.
It's a fun trivia for you. So I used to dance like all around the world, and I was quite studious as well. So like when a lot of my friends would be 14, drunk at the park on White Lightning cider, whereas I was every Saturday and Sunday either training or competing. So I just never really got into it. And I was quite geeky at school as well. And then I think I went to university, and it just like unleashed this kind of like nightlife. I stopped dancing because I had to choose really, did I want to be a dancer or did I want to go to university? And I settled on uni. So when I got there, I also didn't have any money when I got there. So I got like 4 jobs. I was flyering for Vodka Revolutions. I worked as a shot girl. I actually did dance on tables in one club. So and they used to pay me in vodka. So that was fun. And that's really how I got into it, just because everyone else was doing it. And it sounds really silly now. And I look back and I think, God, you should have had more of a backbone and stuck with what you wanted. But everyone was doing it. So I just said, well, I'm going to do it as well. And I think when I first started drinking, I really drank for fun because that's just what I thought it was. But I really started to steadily notice how I was drinking for emotions, like to get through stress, to get through anxiety, to feel more confident, to go up and talk to boys. Whereas before I'd been so like quiet and reserved, whereas now I was this like party girl, and I just felt like it gave me this kind of like sparkle, which in hindsight, it just made me a sloppy mess. But at the time I thought, this is great. And also it was like peak time when Geordie Shore had just come out when I went to university. So it was that real culture of going out and getting absolutely like mortal. And it was kind of like women could do whatever they wanted, and you could just go out and flash your knickers and be really raucous. And I just loved that because I thought it was so empowering. So I just used to go out and like drink as much as the boys. I was involved in a lot of like sports socials as well, and they were like very heavy drinking. So I literally went from like a nothing drinker to like a 4 or 5 night a week binge drinker just really quickly. And my drinking career, I always say, was really short because it was like 8 years. But those 8 years, I just went like hell for leather.
Yeah, I was going to say that you started late and you peaked early.
Yeah.
You really did. It's really interesting you talk about that keeping up with the lads thing as a point of equality. For me, that was really important as well. The drinking pints and being able to do it at the same quantity, and there is definitely something in that. It feels empowering. So and so you do it for political reasons as well.
Yeah. I think as well, I went to an all-girls secondary school, so I had never really been around boys that much. Like I knew the odd boys, and most of them were like my brother's friend. And then suddenly I was with boys and they were drinking, and I thought, well, I want to drink as much as they can. I want to prove that, I'm as tough as they can, and I can do as many shots as they can. So I think that was like a real thing that came in with it.
So that's good reason to not have single sex schools. Let's go there. So you talk about. I'm interested in just unpicking a little bit more about the mental health stuff. When we first started Club Soda, people used to say that they were trying to change their drinking to lose weight. It's the number one reason, and now mental health is the number one reason. And I guess for my generation, we didn't even think about mental health when we were younger. So knowing that it affected our mental health is quite a new realization that might attach themselves. How do you think that manifests itself in people of your age? And do they really talk about mental health as much as I think they do? And do they talk about what causes that? And did that help in terms of determining for you that mental health was part of that issue?
I think I only started realizing it towards the end. I think even this conversation has only come up in like the last 4 or 5 years, really. When I was at uni, mental health wasn't really a big thing then either. So I never kind of correlated the link. I always just thought I was quite like controlled and anxious when I was a teenager. I never really thought of it as like anxiety. I just thought that I was quite like, I don't know, nervous and liked things the way they were. And even when I had mild states of like OCD when I was younger, of like having to go and check things 4 times, and I'd leave my house and then go back. But at the time I just thought that was me. I just thought that was the way like I was a bit wired. And then I think when I got to uni, all of a sudden alcohol was this like magical elixir that like didn't make me think any of those thoughts and calm me down. And I felt really chilled when I first started drinking and felt more confident and didn't feel insecure. And I didn't really realize, I didn't correlate at all that it was alcohol that was slowly therefore making my mental health worse. And because I started to rely on that, I didn't have any like confidence of my own. It was just my go-to for like, oh, when I feel insecure, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a drink. And no one ever talked about addressing those root things, or maybe you do suffer from anxiety. Like it wasn't really ever a thing. And then I think I just started to notice it towards the end of my drinking. And that is when the mental health conversation, I think, started picking up. And I actually realized this isn't quite normal to feel this way after a hangover and to feel so, so awful. So I do think I only just realized, but I think now the information is out there, and I think people are more savvy about how alcohol can affect their mental health. And I think that we're a lot better about talking about root problems and why you feel like this and why you feel like you need to reach for a drink. Whereas I just never, ever addressed that. I never thought of it at all. And I think there is a lot of mental health support out there now, but I do think a lot of it still doesn't really focus on alcohol, especially for young people. I don't think it's as prominent at the front of the mental health conversation as it should be.
It's not something that that health professionals raise at the very start of a conversation. And I mean, I think it cuts across the generations actually, because it wasn't until I started Club Soda that I realized how many women of my age are all on antidepressants. And I'm like, I am gobsmacked by how many people are on antidepressants. It's never even occurred to me that that was something that I would do. And then I realized that doctors never, ever ask anybody how much they're drinking as part of that.
And you really shouldn't drink on antidepressants, and not many people are ever told that. Like, you're kind of like advised, but no one ever goes into the science of actually it's really detrimental, because they're trying to bring your serotonin up and actually alcohol is going to bring it down. So you're just like balancing it out. But I don't think a lot of my friends who have been on antidepressants haven't ever been told the science about drinking on them.
No, absolutely. It's just, in fact, nearly every medication is affected by alcohol that you take, because I was having this conversation with somebody who used to sell natural supplements, and some of their biggest clients are people who drink too much and think they're putting the good back in. But of course, your stomach lining is damaged by drinking. So anything that goes into your stomach is not absorbed so well if you've been drinking, and that includes all your medication. So it's a real, like, we just have such selective facts based on what we really want to hear and what doctors want to tell you. And of course, they drink quite a lot as well sometimes, so they're not going to do that necessarily.
Yeah.
But what I hear from your story is that there were lots of good things that you felt it gave you at the beginning. That confidence, meeting new friends, being in the company of strangers and feeling at ease. Those are the things that can keep us attached to alcohol. Those things that we like. When you read The Joy of Being Sober, and you felt it spoke to you, did you just go, right, that's it, I can do this and I don't need any of those positive things? Or did you go, okay, I can hear something that sounds like it's good, but
yeah, I think because for me, like, drinking had started to tip a scale. Like, when it started and it was fine and almost good, and then all of a sudden all the bad things started happening. So I became really depressed. I became quite introverted, and I was blacking out and doing stupid stuff and feeling really embarrassed. All of a sudden the scale started to tip massively. But I, like you say, was still so attached to all those other things that my head only ever saw the things you would give up when you were drinking. So I was thinking about, I'd be giving up confidence. I'd be giving up not feeling insecure. I'd be giving up like all of this stuff. And then when I read the book, I suddenly thought, actually, I could gain a lot from this. I'd never really thought about it that way. And I'd never thought about how, maybe alcohol was actually taking away from my confidence. I'd always assumed it just made me really confident. But what I didn't realize is that actually, because I was totally relying on alcohol for my confidence, I wasn't building any myself. So when I wasn't drinking, I was less confident than ever. And so I suddenly started to realize that actually, if I stopped and put the drink down, I would have to start building that confidence myself, and I would have no choice, really. So yeah, it just really resonated with me, looking at the positives and just talking about all those things that I thought would be the scariest parts of not drinking, and actually reframing them as how it could be the making of me and how all this stuff I could have without alcohol.
I think that's really important, because when we first start to think about it, and that's normally when we're feeling guilt and we're feeling shame, we very quickly dismiss even doing a process that talks about what I might gain and what I might lose, and whether they balance out at all, or could possibly tip the other way, because our inner brain's going, no, you don't want to go there. You definitely don't want to go there. And actually, it's a real good first step, which is to sit down and have that real honest conversation with yourself. And I know that sounds really simple, and it's self-help 101, but I can tell you, I avoided doing that for 10 years. And that's because my brain was knowing that what the answer would be, and it didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Doing that simple exercise really makes a difference.
Yeah. And I think there's so many, I always say, like, parallels with being in a relationship with someone that you know is not good for you. And it was like I was really attached to these few little things that were benefiting me from this relationship, and not addressing all these other things that were horrendous for me. And so many of us kind of stay in relationships that we know aren't good for us because of, like, our body feels safe in that, because it's not an unknown. It's even though it's not working for us, it's still safe, and our brains like being safe. Whereas the thought of coming out of that, you're like, it's so scary, like it's really unknown. I don't know how I would do all those things. And that's exactly how I felt about alcohol. Even though I knew it was so bad for me and it was really negatively affecting my life, I just clung on to those positives because everything else felt too scary and too overwhelming.
And you know that breakups are painful. Ultimately, there's, even if you instigate them and you want to save yourself that pain.
Yeah.
And I see it all the time as well in the sober community, which is everyone wants to tell everyone to give up drinking because they want to save them the pain that they've been through.
Yeah.
But of course, you actually do have to go through it. But it does get better. You know, if you've ever entered a relationship, like, you know, some of my relationships now, I can't even remember that I was in them. I mean, it's madness. So, you know.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's even harder as well, because when you come out of a relationship, you're like, okay, well, I won't have to see that person anymore. Whereas with alcohol, you're like, well, I'm still going to have to see them. I'm still going to have to be around them. So you have all those like extra tricky barriers that you know that you're going to have to navigate as well.
That's true. So if we move on to the subject of the Q&A, which is about a bit more about making friends. So you suddenly took away from yourself this massive thing that had been your confidence booster and the thing that stopped you feeling socially anxious. Did you stay at home and be miserable straight after giving up drinking? How did you even go to begin to address that? Did you even positively address it?
Do you know what? So I was so stubborn because all my friends said, you're not going to be fun. You're not going to have a good time anymore. And just something in me was really competitive. And I was like, no, I am still going to be fun. And I don't advise this for anyone, but I literally like ripped the band-aid off. Like first week, it was my friend's birthday in Shoreditch, and I went out and people started dropping off at like 1 o'clock, and I was like, I'm going to stay till 3. I'm going to be there right till the end. And although it was probably not a good idea at the time because I was a very new sober baby, I think I still say that it was a positive thing for me because it taught me so early on that, okay, yeah, it might not be the best night out, but I've done it and I've survived it. And everything else from that point just felt like it was getting easier. Like there were some bigger challenges like sober weddings and sober dates, but by doing one of the biggest, scariest things and like not overthinking it, I was literally just like, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to worry. As soon as I did that, I just felt better. I think had I overthought it, and I think a lot of people do, you can overthink it and feel anxious about doing it. Whereas for me, just going out straight away, I think everything else just got easier.
Yeah, I think you and I are probably in the same school of thought on that. Your competitive streak came out, my rebellious streak came out, and I was like, yeah, I'm going into the pub. It's going to be absolutely fine. And I think that there are two schools of thought. Some people say, you know, for a short while, you may need to stay away from things and stay away from people that triggered and places that triggered you.
Yeah.
And then there's the other, which is about getting out there, because at some point you're going to have to get out there, and hiding away from it doesn't help. And in fact, you've just described what I think it feels like a superpower. You went and you absolutely smashed your first event early on, and it gave you some confidence. And I think there's no right or wrong answer on this, is there?
Agreed.
If it doesn't feel right for you, don't go. If you feel you don't want to be somewhere, leave early. But if you feel like you're smashing it, that's great. But equally, don't bank that as being confidence for every occasion.
Yeah.
Because I think you then might go to something else. And I actually found small dinner parties the hardest, because I was so used to sharing. Those were about sharing a bottle of wine with really close friends who I'd spent lots of time with, and I could smell the wine in the wine glasses right next to me. Yeah. And I found them more challenging.
Yeah, I agree, because also I felt like I had to keep conversation up at things like that. Whereas when it was like a big night out, I didn't really have to talk, because we'd just be like on the dance floor, jumping around. No one could really hear anyone. And, you know, the bar was so busy that no one was getting a drink by the end anyway. So those sort of things I actually felt more comfortable at, rather than, like you say, something where I'm sitting there going, oh God, am I being awkward? Am I being nervous? Am I chatting enough? Am I chatting too much? Like those sort of things are things that I found harder. I think those bigger events like festivals, I just found a bit easier.
Yeah, I also found I felt awkward for a little while not having the drink in the hand, and it felt like I'd got, like, if you've got a broken arm or something, and then suddenly one day it didn't feel so awkward, and I can't even pin it, but the more you practice, the easier it feels.
Yeah, 100%. I was actually, one of my like weird sober tips is, when I first stopped drinking, I bought myself like a small digital camera. And because I used to have one at uni that I used to take pictures on nights out, and then all of a sudden phones completely took over. So I bought myself like a small digital camera, and I just started taking pictures of like all my friends on nights out, and actually just having something in my hand felt like, yeah, like you said, there wasn't, I don't know, not the absence of just, okay, where do I put this hand? Just having it. And I took those pictures, and it kept me really busy. And like, I remember going to friends' birthday parties and just taking like lovely birthday pictures of them with like balloons and stuff. And for some reason, that I just found that really helpful at the beginning.
Yeah, I can really see that. It gives you a sense of purpose for the evening beyond just drinking as well.
Yeah.
I found, funny enough, not long before I gave up, I went to a friend's 70th birthday party, and I was determined not to get drunk. And so I volunteered to top up other people's glasses, clear the plates away, because I knew the busier I was, and I had something to do, which meant I could talk to lots of people, which I really enjoy, but also not feel I had to stand there for a long amount of time with a drink in my hand. And, you know, it was one of those occasions where I came out thinking, oh yeah, I can do this. I can not drink. And then the next day I'd go and drink too much. But, you know, the principle is very much the same. Did you feel you lost friends when you first gave up drinking? Did they all go away going, oh God, Millie's really boring now, and I don't want to spend time with her?
No, I think I had a weird experience, because I always say my friends are very ambivalent for the pure fact that I don't think they believed me. So at the start, I don't think they gave me too much of a hard time, because they didn't think it was going to be like a forever thing, because they were like, oh, you'll be drinking next week. Oh, she's just doing one of these phases. Because I think I'd done a few breaks over the years. I remember I gave up alcohol for Lent once, because it was just like, I just needed a break. So I think they just thought it was one of those things. And then I remember it got to about 6 months, and I was going on holiday with my friends, and they said, oh, you are going to drink on holiday, aren't you? And I was like, no, this is like, I'm not doing it. And then I think they suddenly realized that it was a forever thing. But by that point, I think they'd been so used to me coming out, and they'd seen that I would still go out and still have fun, that it actually didn't bother them that much. So I do say that I was very lucky. I think like friendships definitely changed. We would always go out and just get really, really boozy. And then I think I started suggesting new activities for us to do. So friendships have definitely changed, and I've got some friends who I used to do a lot of drinking with that I don't really see as much. But I'm really lucky in that I don't think I've actually fully lost any friends through it. I've only gained friends, which has been great.
I think I hear two really interesting things there, which is, one is that you that idea of a short break and using Sober October or Dry January or Lent or anything like that as cover for the start gives people a chance to get used to it under the protection of a thing, a challenge, which is great. And the other thing I heard is that you started instigating different types of socials. I want to just dig into that a little bit more, which is that, you know, I mean, friendship is all about, I have a great postcard on my fridge, actually, where a friend sent me a postcard that says, if you want good friends, you have to be one. Yeah. And I think that's really important, that you shouldn't necessarily wait for people to come to you. How can people start instigating new things to do with friends, and how easy is it?
Yeah, I actually thought it would be really difficult. And I think the thing is, like, you really hope that everyone's going to get fully on board and be like, why don't we do this? Or why don't we do something different? But ultimately, I think it is down to you, because you're the one making the big lifestyle choice. And I think when I first stopped, I just all of a sudden said to my friends, oh, maybe we could do whitewater rafting, or maybe we could do this. And they'd all go, oh yeah, that sounds like a nice idea. But ultimately, going to the pub or going to a bar or going even a restaurant is just easy and like default for people. And thinking about having to organize something different to that can send people into all sorts of stress. So I was like, okay, I really want to do this, so I'm going to organize these things. So I just say, right, look, I've organized this, we're going to go here, and like we're all going to have fun. And they loved it. Like there was some like hesitancy at first, like, oh, can't we just go to the pub? But in fact, they are the things now that we've done that they talk about the most. They'll be like, oh, do you remember the time we went to the theme park for your birthday? And do you remember that time we did bowling? And they're the things that they talk about now, rather than just like all our nights out that have all gone into one blur. Like when we talk about people's birthdays, they're like, what bar did we go to? Do you remember that? Oh, no, that was not that night. But these are all really like separate things that we've done now, and they just love it. So whenever I say anything now, they're like, yeah, let's do it. But also, as time has gone on, it's slowly shifted our friendship group to do different stuff. So they will suggest stuff now. Like at the beginning, it was purely all me, and it can make you a bit bitter about that because you feel like you're organizing everything. But because I was so like serious about wanting to change my life and do all these fun things, I just kind of took it on the chin that I was going to be the fun organizer for a while. But also it gave me stuff to do as well. It gave me things to focus on and things to feel excited about. When I was not drinking, I was like, oh yeah, I could do this, and I can see if they want to go rock climbing, and I can see if they want to do that. So it also had that added thing of giving me things to focus on and plan.
Yeah, it gives you some focus for your time. It also, you learn lots by organising things for other people, which we might come back to in a minute. But also, I think you begin to realise what's on in your local area that you'd never noticed before, because you thought that because the pub was so easy. I remember when we first started Club Soda, I did these little town guides of what to do that doesn't involve drinking in Birmingham, or what doesn't involve drinking in Newcastle. And I started to like feel really jealous, like, oh, there's the planetarium here has got a stargazing night, and this has got this. But I also realized how much people don't even know where to start with some of that stuff, because you know, I was always at least somebody that looked a lot at the theatre, so I knew that there were things out there. So how can people begin to look for things to do where they can join other people's organised things, or where they can begin to organise some of their own?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at places like Meetup. I tried to find people on like Bumble BFF. I looked at Time Out. I'd always get Time Out magazine on the tube. I mean, TikTok now, I don't know how many people are on it, but it's so great for like things to do in London, things to do here. Like people do videos on them all the time. I mean, social media, I think, is amazing for that. Even if you just kind of search your area with your hashtag, I think you'll find so many things. But I would also say, like, don't be scared of doing things on your own, because that's what I would do sometimes. If there was something I really wanted to do, typically I wouldn't have done it on my own. I would have only done it if other people came with me. And I got a lot better about saying I was going to do these things on my own. And then I'd put the text out to the group and say, girls, I'm going to do this. If anyone wants to join me, you're very welcome. If not, I'm going to do it on my own. And I just started doing things like that. Like, I love the theatre. I went and saw Harry Potter on my own because someone wanted to come. And that as well really helped, because I just felt like I got a bit of confidence from doing things on my own and having new experiences and not having to wait for anyone else. But I think there's so many groups now, and not necessarily just, you don't need to necessarily find sober people. I always say that's one of the biggest things. There's so many people out there who drinking isn't actually a top priority like it was for me. So like I've recently joined this Facebook group called the Wild Wanderers, and it's like people who love to go hiking and go camping and things like that. So even that, just to see people who actually aren't really that fussed about drinking, you don't necessarily have to make sober friends. You can just find these Facebook groups that have interests of things you like doing.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be drink led, is what I call it. So I'm a big walker, so walking groups are great. I'm part of a silent movie meetup group that all go to meet for weird silent movies in central London. That there is something everywhere, and particularly walking and the local ramblers. You know, you don't have to go to everyone. Yes, everyone will stop at the pub, and some people will have pints, but you'll find that over half won't, because they're driving home anyway. So, you know, suddenly the pressure isn't there, and you will make new friends.
Yeah. I think even like local groups, like where I live, there's like a local community Facebook group, and people will post like, oh, I'm running a Pilates session, or I'm doing this, or we're running like a health and beauty fair down the road, and things that I had never really thought of before, because when I was drinking, all I wanted to do was engage with my friends who wanted to drink. So I never really joined groups like that. So I think Facebook groups are like amazing for that sort of thing.
One of the things that people get very anxious about is making new friends. That idea of walking into a room full of strangers. How do you deal with that, Millie?
Oh, I mean, I try and make a lot of free friends, I think, as well. So like with the events we run, we get so many people before saying like, oh, I'm a bit nervous about coming on my own. So we say, okay, comment on the event on Instagram, and then someone else will comment and say, oh, I'm nervous about going on my own as well. Why don't we swap numbers and we can meet before? So if you can, try and do something like that. If you're going to something new, if you have joined a Facebook group and then you're going to, for the first time, walk into a room with these people, see if you can make a friend before. I always think that's that's a good thing. But I don't know, I think it's time, and no one really wants to hear this, but I think the first time you go and meet new people, you're never just going to be able to go straight up to people and just start chatting to them. I think it takes a special type of person, maybe you as an extrovert who would be able to do that.
I have started doing that. I will just go and barge into a group of people talking now and just introduce myself and say hello.
Yeah, and I will
My
now.
new challenge.
Yeah, but at the start of sobriety, I didn't. But that has really come with time of learning how to be confident without alcohol. And I think it's a mixture of just learning how to be confident in many situations without alcohol. And like, I remember going on my first sober date and I was terrified. I was so nervous. And then now a sober date, I'm like, okay, it's fine. Yeah, we'll just meet. And then that's it. Like, I don't get nervous about them at all. Whereas that kind of thinking would have been like unfathomable to me at the beginning. So I think a lot of it is time and practice. You just have to keep putting yourself out there in situations, and also just remember that so many people are in the same boat as you, especially if you're going to an event where the idea is to like meet people like you. That's like the whole premise. No one's going to think you're weird, no one's going to think you're odd. Like, you just have to go in there and introduce yourself.
I think it's interesting that as a society we've actually distilled one of the best things in the world is meeting new people, and we've distilled that into something that can only be done if you're half cut. It's a real big societal myth. And so first of all, I think just knowing that you will make more friends and that it is all possible without drinking. And I think the reason why I've started going to groups of people or going up to people who stood on their own and saying hello is because I hadn't realised quite how much everybody was socially anxious.
Yeah.
And if somebody stood on their own, they're absolutely desperate for someone to come and say hello to them. And so if I'm less socially anxious, I feel it's my kind duty to go and speak to somebody.
Yeah.
And I guess I got the best of that when we've been running Queers Without Beers, and nearly everybody comes on their own. And so if there's a group of people already talking, I will actually go, would you like me to introduce you to a group that are already talking, and bring them in, and just to see how I've managed to reduce that social awkwardness for them by doing that. Makes me feel really happy, and like I've got a purpose for the evening, and I'm doing something useful as well. And these are all great gifts we can give to people. Our attention to saying hello is a gift to others. So it's exciting.
I do exactly the same. And what I find fascinating as well is, like, if someone comes in, like I remember, say the last event we did, someone came in and they were like one of the first people, and then someone else came in shortly after. So I was like, okay, I'm going to introduce you to each other, because both of them said, oh, I don't know anyone, I'm a bit nervous. So I introduced them. Then like a third person came in. They said, oh, I'm really nervous. So I said, okay, join this group. And like all these people kept coming in, and they were seeing these groups of people chatting, thinking that they like knew each other or already had these bonds, or they too were really confident enough to go over to people. And they didn't realize that I had just made up a group fully of people who didn't know anyone and didn't want to talk to other people. But I think when you come into a situation, you're like, oh, look at them, they're having so much fun, they're really confident, they're really talking. But I was like, I have introduced every single one of them, and I will introduce you as well. So it's just fascinating. I think that people feel really like, oh my God, they've got this vibe going on already, I'll be intruding that. But I'm like, 5 minutes ago, they were you. So don't worry.
I call it proactive hosting, and it's quite tiring. It's great if there's a couple of you doing it, but it's fantastic to pair people up. But it's always worth remembering that every time you walk into a room, 99% of the people in that room are nervous about meeting new people, just like you. And then the other percent are you and me, Millie, now.
I think it's weird as well when you're like hosting. I have like a different hat on, and I try and keep that hat when I'm not hosting, because I'm like, because I'm there and it's like my event, I feel super confident. I don't feel awkward about meeting any of these new people. But then if it was me going into a room in the same situation, I would feel like that. So I try and put that hat back on of like, okay, I'm just gonna like dive in there.
Cool. So tell us a bit more about your events, because you do lots of really exciting events that I feel far too old for.
Oh no, we get
don't worry, Millie. I don't feel too old for very long generally. So it's okay.
Yeah, we do loads of events. So like, I wanted to really prove to people that they could do something fun and not be drunk. So our events are open to everyone, whether they want to stop drinking, whether they literally just want to do something that doesn't involve alcohol, whether they're taking a break. Like, literally the only thing I say is that please don't drink before you get there or when you're there. What you do in the rest of your time is fine. So people come and they can have an experience of a bottomless brunch that doesn't involve booze. They can come to one of our dance classes, because that is such a big thing for people that I think we don't talk about enough. enough is that so many people say to me, oh, I could give up drinking, but I don't know how I would dance sober. And I'm like, well, look, if that's your only problem, then let's get you learning how you can like have some basic rhythm. So we do like dance classes, we do mixer events, and the whole kind of premise is to meet people and to have fun without a drink. There's no like sit down, share your deepest, darkest secrets. I do find that most people actually end up doing that naturally because that's their bonding thing. So when I go round, I'll hear conversations of like, yeah, this was my drunkest moment. But there's no obligation to do that. We don't make anyone sit down or introduce themselves. If you just want to come, chill, have some brunch, and just prove to yourself really that there is so much out there that you can do that doesn't have to involve alcohol. So yeah, we've been running them for a few years now. I'm glad that they are back up because COVID took that away from us. We also do a virtual wake up club, which is every other Saturday. So that is just like a safe space that you can come and chat. Again, it's not like a program or anything. You can just come and meet other women, sit down, eat your breakfast, drink your coffee, talk about things you're finding hard this week, talk about some of your wins. It's just like a nice chilled space.
And that's really cool. And, you know, creating sober socials is actually very, we would talk about this before, is more difficult than you all think.
Yeah.
You may think that we've all got communities, have got hundreds of thousands of people in them, and we'll be able to connect you with lots of people locally, but it's not always quite that easy. The one thing that I think is great though about being sober is it's easy to throw yourself on a train on a Saturday morning to go somewhere. And in fact, you know, I love traveling anyway, but so an excuse to go somewhere new is always good. But the fact that I do it now without any fear that I won't get up and make it is quite exciting.
Yeah, every time I'm on a train journey home from like a big city where traditionally I would have been boozy, like on a Hindu or something, I love the train journey home. I just have like a little snooze. Sometimes I read a book, whereas before I would have been like dying, someone get me home, I need a Burger King. Whereas now I'm like, this is quite lovely.
Or if I'd managed to bagsy a cheap first class ticket in the Virgin Lounge, I'd have been spending my time how to trick the guy into giving me more wine.
Yeah.
It's amazing how drunk you can get in a very short journey from Birmingham to London, I can tell you. Oh, God, the embarrassment.
I know, the flashbacks.
Oh, so if you were going to give any more tips for people on making friends, I think we've covered quite a lot about finding non-drink-led events that are already existing, being the orchestrator, the conductor of your own friends' social life and finding new things to do, and also remembering that everybody is socially anxious in a situation. That I guess there are some questions that people ask all the time, or are you having a drink or whatever? How do you deal with those drinks, particularly those questions when you're meeting strangers for the first time? And, you know, even in a work context, that can be quite awkward.
Yeah, I think, again, this is another one of the things that has just taken time. I remember the words coming out of my mouth at the start of like, I don't drink. I used to like hyperventilate that someone was going to ask me questions. But the more confident I've become in it, the more I would just say, oh, no, thanks, I don't drink. And then people don't really push back on it. If you say it and own it, people just don't question it. Some people will say why. And I always say, I think it was Mandy from Love Sober that was talking about this kind of traffic light system, which I've adopted, is if people ask me a question, it depends how they ask it, and I assign them a traffic light color as to how much information I'll give them. So if they ask me in a really like sarcastic way, like, oh, why don't you drink? They're a red. So they get like baseline. I go, oh, it just made me really unhappy. If they're like an amber, maybe they just want to ask a bit more. I'll kind of give them a little bit more of the story. And if they're green and they ask in a way that I think, I feel like I've got an idea sometimes when people are thinking about doing it themselves and they say, oh, why don't you drink? And they're as if to say, I've thought about not drinking. Then I'll go into kind of like the whole spiel. So I don't think you always have to have one standard blanket response. I think you can go with how the question has been put to you, what tone, are they trying to wind you up, or are they actually trying to gauge more because they're interested in like sobriety or sober curiosity? So I think that is important. I don't just have one thing, but whatever I do say, I say it with confidence.
Absolutely. I was sat in the theatre last night and a guy was sat next to me, and the person sat with him said, oh, do you want a drink? And I don't think she'd have cared what he said, drink wise, but he automatically went into a long spiel about why he wasn't drinking. Oh my God, do you find yourself earwigging when you hear that? Oh, I want to know why. And I was thinking, this is really interesting. He must be in a really anxious stage at the minute.
Yeah.
He's doing a Sober October and he's already proffering an excuse because he's worried. Yeah, you know, we were in a theatre bar and it's a very different context. And so, yeah, it was really interesting that he was making excuses already when actually he just needed to go, no, I'm not drinking, I'll have a soft drink. Or I kept going very loudly, isn't it great? They've got Heineken Zero here. It might tempt him to have a look at what was behind the bar.
Yeah, I think that's the thing as well. If you offer a solution, I think that's really helpful, because if you leave it open-ended of, oh, I don't drink, people will start to panic. Whereas if you say, oh, I actually don't drink, thanks, but if you've got ginger beer, or maybe you could get me at least like a Heineken Zero, that'd be great. And then people have a solution in their mind and they can run off and do whatever. But I think if you don't give them the solution, then they're a bit like, oh, is this awkward? Do I ask any questions? Do I not?
I mean, I think it's interesting to remember that anytime that anybody asks you or comes up to you, particularly if they're new, that they're being socially awkward.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're just using drink to get over that. And so you do need to give them a solution or ask them a question about themselves. I always say, if you move it on and move the conversation on to a conversation, so who are you? What do you do? If you've got family, la, 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 whatever, then people's specialist subject is themselves. They can always answer a question about themselves. So, Oh, brilliant. It's been great to spend some time with you, Millie. And it's been great to get your advice. Can you tell people where they can find all your information? It will be on the post and everything. But
yeah, of course. So it's the best Instagram page is Sober Girl Society, or you can come over to my personal one. I'm actually doing a Sober October video every day for anyone that's doing it and wants a little bit more help.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.